All right, this is an annual ranking they do of the most competitive economies, the most business-friendly economies. The World Economic Forum puts it out, and we are on top. Singapore, Germany, Switzerland, and Japan round out the top five. The bottom line is this has been built on tax cuts and improving economic environment, a good place to do business, et cetera. Let's get the read on all of this, because the president says in the midterms, you elect Democrats, all that goes away. Now, of course, he's being kind of politically and strategically minded there. Let's get the read from Democratic strategist Cavuto, Axios reporter Elena Teen. We've also got National Taxpayers Union senior fellow Mattie Duppler and the Center for Freedom and Prosperity's Dan Mitchell. All right, Capri, to you first. The argument the president says, go to you and your Democratic friends, game over, all this goes away, kiss it goodbye, you say?
I say a few things. Number one, I think that he, as you said, Neil, he is being politically strategic right now. That sounds good. It's going to fire people up, and we do need to protect the economy. I'll give credit where credit is due. But here's the thing. Even if the most progressive people take over the House and they decide that they're going to try to repeal the tax cuts, which frankly I think is not particularly a good idea, if they want to do that, Donald Trump still has the power of the veto. Therefore, the actual danger, I don't think, is there, for example, with the tax cuts. And let's also remember the fact that a lot of the issues, particularly in the context of regulatory reform, have been executed from executive orders. So, a lot of power still holds in the White House. And I get where he's coming from, but I don't think the threat is actually there.
Mattie, where do you think the tax cut enthusiasm would go if the House switches place? I mean, one of the arguments Nancy Pelosi says is scrap the tax cuts, start from scratch. What do you think?
Yep. Well, Pelosi and a lot of the Democrats have been unequivocal in the fact that when they take power, they say they are repealing the tax cuts root and branch as soon as they can. Now, Capri is right. They've got some impediments in their way, mainly the fact that the Senate will probably still be Republican, and certainly Donald Trump will still be in the White House. So what does that mean? That means Democrats are going to have to sell their message to the American people as one of being either of the resistance, where they don't want to get any other work done, or that they want to work with Republicans to put public policy in place that continues to keep the economy churning. I would love to see the latter, but it's a good question of what that would look like, Democrats and Republicans working together for good public policy that allows us to continue to experience economic growth. As has been made pretty clear, until we saw some of the fundamental realignment with the tax code and the regulatory regime under the Trump administration, those changes were pretty much few and far between the last several years, so I'm not sure where consensus could be had.
Well, Elena, one thing I've discovered in reading a lot about midterm elections and everything else is the economy isn't as a prominent a factor as you would think. In that case, Barack Obama in his midterms wouldn't have lost as badly as he did when the economy, particularly in his last one in 2014, was humming along just fine. There is a sort of a read that in midterms it is not about the economy, stupid. What do you think?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I mean, the economy is definitely a huge driver of this, and several Republicans will tout the economy under this administration as reasons for why Republicans should go to the polls in November and continue to vote for the Republican majority, and so that nothing changes if perhaps Democrats do take the House in November. But I think that something here that's really important to note is that regardless of who wins in November, whether it's Democrats win by slim margins or Republicans eke out a narrow majority, it's not likely that either is going to have this huge, like people talk of this blue wave. It looks like it's going to still be pretty gridlock, and it's really unclear who the president or what the president is talking about when he says that there's a chance that if Democrats win the majority that they could have some effect on the economy, because regardless, it doesn't really seem like any huge legislation will get through with such small numbers in the majority.
Dan, the president has gone out of his way in the last couple of days to criticize the Federal Reserve, more or less saying if something goes wrong here, you can't put the finger on me, it's the Federal Reserve, that the pace of rate increases are far exceed the need for as many as we've had and as many as we stand to get. What did you make of that posture he's taking? He's certainly not the first president to bemoan the Federal Reserve raising rates, but he's on it again and again and again.
I wish Trump was like Reagan. Reagan told the Fed, your job is to make sure the inflation genie doesn't get out of the bottle. And I worry that Trump is more of a populist who just likes the continuation of the easy money, artificially low interest rates, which, by the way, that's what gives you bubbles. So I worry about it. But it is good news that we're back at the top of that competitiveness ranking. It's good news that we're up to number 6 in the economic freedom of the world ranking. I'll give Trump credit if he continues to move in the right direction, but if that's going to happen, he better get serious about spending.
All right. Well, they're already talking about trying to do something about spending. The president today with this idea, all cabinet secretaries to trim 5% from their budgets. Of course, it looks like defense will be absolved of that. So I don't know how far this all goes, Capri, but other presidents have tried similar things. Other presidents have talked from both parties about getting the deficit under control, and then it all fizzles. What do you think?
Well, if only the federal government could operate like state governments. I mean, I was in a state senator for 10 years, and we were required to actually balance our budget because we can't print money. So, you know, even when you do tax cuts, I mean, the theory there is that you're going to end up stimulating the economy and somehow getting that revenue back because people are spending more money and they're being employed and they're bringing that money back into the coffers. So, you know, there's no question that deficits create long-term turmoil and challenges for our economy. I know that on the Democratic side now, you want to talk about sounding the alarm. People are talking 20 days out that if the Republicans hold on to power, that your Social Security and Medicare, those important entitlements, are going to be on the chopping block. So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Back and forth. All right, guys, I apologize for the truncated time with all the events today. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
We will be following that today. The Dow was down about 91 points, having very little to do with this, but calming concerns because we were down over 300 for a while. That all is okay. Cooler heads, hopefully, they say, will prevail in Saudi Arabia. Cooler heads on trade and progress there with